Yes. Let's start with Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Let's do some Radha Jha. Radha, Shri Radha, Radha, Shri Radha, Radha, Shri Radha, Radha, Shri Radha. We are reading Bhagwat Geeta as it is by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Yes. We are starting with chapter 13. Chapter 13, Nature, the Enjoyer and Consciousness. Text 1 and 2. Arjun said, Arjun said, "O my dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, and the field and the knower of the field, and of the of knowledge and the object of knowledge." The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "This body, O son of Kunti, is called the field, and one who knows this body is called the knower of the field." Wow. Okay. Let's read the purport. Arjun was inquisitive about Prakriti, that is nature, Purusha, Purusha, that is the enjoyer, and Kshetra, that is the field, and Kshetrajna, that is its knower, and knowledge and the object of knowledge. When he inquired about all these, Krishna said that this body is called the field, and that one who knows this body is called the knower of the field. This body is the field of activity for the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul is entrapped in material existence and he attempts to load it over material nature. And so, according to his capacity to dominate material nature, he gets a field of activity. That field of activity is the body. And what is the body? The body is made of senses. The conditioned soul wants to enjoy sense gratification, and according to his capacity to enjoy sense gratification, he is offered a body or field of activity. Therefore, the, the body is called Kshetra or the field of activity for the conditioned soul. Now, the person who should not identify himself with the body is called Kshetragyan. Kshetrajna, the knower of the field. It is not very difficult to understand the difference between the field and its knower, the body and the knower of the body. Any person can consider that from childhood to old age, he undergoes so many changes of body and yet is still one person remaining. Thus, there is a difference between the knower of the field of activities and the actual field of activities. A living conditioned soul can thus understand that he is different from the body. It is described in the beginning, Dehinosman, that the living entity is within the body and that the body is changing from childhood to boyhood and then from boyhood to youth and from youth to old age. And the person who owns the body knows that the body is changing. Yes. The owner is distinctly Kshetrajna. Sometimes we think, I am happy, I am man, I am a woman, I am a dog, I am a cat. These are the bodily designations of the knower. But the knower is different from the body. Although we may use many articles, our clothes, etc., we know that we are different from the things used. Similarly, we also understand by a little contemplation that we are different from the body. I or you or anyone else who owns the body is called kshetrajna, the knower of the field of activities. And the body is called kshetra, the field of activities itself. In the first chapters of Bhagwat Geeta, the knower of the body, the living entity, and the position by which he can understand the Supreme Lord are described. In the middle six chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the relationship between the individual soul and the super soul in regard to devotional service are described. The superior position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the subordinate position of the individual soul are definitely defined in these chapters. The living entities are subordinate under all circumstances, but in their forgetfulness, they are suffering. When enlightened by pious activities, they approach the Supreme Lord in different capacities, as the distressed, those who in want of money, the inquisitive, and those in search of knowledge. That is also described. Now, starting from the 13th chapter, how the living entity comes into contact with the material nature and how he is delivered by the Supreme Lord through different methods of fruitive activities, cultivation of knowledge, and the discharge of devotional service are explained. Although the living entity is completely different from the material body, he somehow becomes related. This also is explained. Wow. Let's move to text 3. O Scion of Bharat, who should understand that I am also the knower in all the bodies, and to understand this body and its knower is called knowledge. That is my opinion. Let's read the purport. While discussing the subject of the body and the knower of the body, the soul and the super soul, we shall find three three different topics of study: the Lord, the living entity, and matter. In every field of activities, in every body, there are two souls: the individual soul and the super soul. Because the super soul is the plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, Krishna says, I am also the knower, but I am not the individual knower of the body. I am the supernova. I am present in every body as the Paramatma or super soul. One who studies the subject matter of the field of activity and the knower of the field very minutely in terms of this Bhagavad Gita can attain to knowledge. The Lord says, I am the knower of the field of activities in every individual body. The individual may be the knower of his own body, but he is not in knowledge of other bodies. Yes. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is present in the Super Soul in all bodies, knows everything about all bodies. He knows all the different bodies of all the various species of life. A citizen may know everything about the patch of land, but the king knows not only his palace, but all the properties possessed by the individual citizens. Similarly, one may be the proprietor of the body individually, but the Supreme Lord is the proprietor of all bodies. The king is the original proprietor of the kingdom, and the citizen is the secondary proprietor. Similarly, the Supreme Lord is the supreme proprietor of all bodies. The body consists of the senses. The Supreme Lord is Rishikesh. which means the controller of the senses. He is the original controller of the senses, just as the king is the original controller of all the activities of the state. The citizens are secondary controllers. The Lord says, I am also the knower. This means that He is the superknower. The individual soul knows only his particular body. In Vedic literature, it is stated as follows: "Kshe- Kshetrani ki sharirani bijam kapi shubhashubhe tani vetti sa yogatma tatah kshetra jna uchyate." This body is called the Kshetra, and within it dwells the owner of the body and the Supreme Lord, who knows both the body and the owner of the body. Therefore, he is called the knower of all fields. The distinction between the field of activities, the knower of activities, and the supreme knower of the activities is described as follows. Yes, perfect knowledge of the constitution of the body, the constitution of the individual soul, and the constitution of the super soul is known in terms of Vedic literature as Jnana. That is the opinion of Krishna. To understand both soul and the super soul as one yet distinct is knowledge. One who does not understand the field of activities and the knower of the activity is not perfect knowledge. One has to understand the position of Prakriti, that is nature, Purusha, the enjoyer of the nature, and Ishvara, the knower who dominates or controls nature and the individual soul. One should not confuse the three in their different capacities. One should not confuse the painter, the painting, and the easel. The material world, which is the field of activities, is nature, and the enjoyer of the nature is the living entity. And above them both is the supreme controller, the personality of Godhead. It is stated in the Vedic language in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad 1.12. Bhokta bhogyam preritaram cha matval sarvam proktam trividham brahmam itat. There are three Brahman conceptions. Prakriti is Brahman as the field of activities, and the Jiva, that is individual soul, is called Brahman and is trying to is also called Brahman, is also Brahman and is trying to control material nature. And the controller of both of them is also Brahman, but he is the factual controller. So in this chapter, it will also be explained that out of the two knowers, one is fallible and the other is infallible. One is superior and the other is subordinate. One who understands the two knowers of the field to be one and the same contradicts the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who states here very clearly that I am also the knower of the field of activity. So, one who misunderstands a rope to be a serpent is not in knowledge. There are different kinds of bodies and there are different knowers of the bodies because each individual soul has his individual capacity for loading it over material nature. There are different for loading it over material nature. There are different bodies. But the Supreme also is present in them as the controller. The word cha or cha is significant for it indicates the total number of bodies. That is the opinion of Srila Baldev Vidyabhushana. Krishna is the super soul present in each and every body apart from the individual soul. And the Krishna explicitly states here that real knowledge is to know that the super soul is the controller of both the field of activities and the finite enjoy. Yes. So we are always three: body, our individual soul, and the super soul, which is our consciousness or subconsciousness. Let's move to text 4. Now, please hear my brief description of this field of activity and how it is constituted and what its changes are, whence it is produced, what that knower of the field of activity is, and his influences are, and what his influences are. Let's read the purport. The Lord is describing the field of activities and the knower of the field of activities in their constitutional positions. One has to know how the body is constituted, the material of which this body is made of, under whose control this body is working, how the changes are taking place, where from the changes are coming, what the causes are, what the reasons are, what the ultimate goal of the individual soul is, and what the actual form of the individual soul is. One should also know the distinction between the individual living soul and the super soul, their different influences, their potentials, etc. So one just has to understand this Bhagwat Gita directly from the description given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all this will be clarified. But one should be careful not to consider the Supreme Personality of Godhead in every body to be one with the individual soul, the Jeev. This is something like equating the potent and the impotent. Yes. Let's move to text 5. That knowledge of the field of activities and the knower of the activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings. It is especially presented in Vedanta Sutra with all reasoning as to cause and effect. Okay, Vedanta Sutra. Let's read the purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is the highest authority in explaining this knowledge. Still, as a matter of course, learned scholars and standard authorities always give evidence from previous authorities. Krishna is explaining this most controversial point regarding the duality and non duality of the soul and super soul by referring to a scripture, the Vedanta, which is accepted as authority. First, he says this is according to different sages. As far as the sages are concerned, besides himself, Vyasadeva, the author of the Vedanta Sutra, is a great sage, and in the Vedanta Sutra, duality is perfectly explained. And Vyasadev's father, Parashara, is also a great sage, and he writes in his books of religiosity, Aham Tvam Cha Tatyani, we, you, I, and the various other living entities are all transcendental, although in material bodies. Now we are fallen into the ways of the three modes of material nature according to our different karma. As such, some are on higher levels and some are in the lower nature. The higher and the lower natures exist due to ignorance and are being manifested in an infinite number of living entities. Sorry, I didn't follow this. I'll read this again. As such, some are on higher levels and some are in the lower nature. The higher and the lower natures exist due to ignorance and are being manifested in an infinite number of living entities. But the super soul, which is infallible, is uncontaminated by the three qualities of nature that is transcendental. Similarly, in the original Vedas, a distinction between the soul and super soul and the body is made, especially in the Katha Upanishad. There are many great sages who have explained this and Parasraya is considered principal among them. Okay. The word Chandobhi refers to the various Vedic literatures. The Taittiriya Upanishad, for example, which is a branch of the Yajurveda, describes nature, the living entity, and the supreme personality of Godhead. As stated before, Kshetra is the field of activities, and there are two kinds of Kshetrajna, the living entity, individual living entity, and the supreme living entity. As stated in the Taittiriya Upanishad 2.8, Brahma Pucham Pratishta. There is a manifestation of Supreme Lord's energy known as Annamaya, dependence upon food for existence. Yes, this is a materialistic realization of the Supreme. Then in Pranamaya, after realizing the Supreme Absolute Truth in food, one can realize the Absolute Truth in the living symptoms or living form or life forms. In Jnanmaya, realization extends beyond the living symptoms to the point of thinking, feeling, and willing. Then there is Brahman realization called Vijnana Maya, in which the living entity's mind and life symptoms are distinguished from the living entity himself. The next and the supreme stage is Anandmaya, realization of all blissful nature. Thus, there are 5 stages of Brahman realization, which are called Brahma Puchha. Out of these, the first 3, that is Annamay, Pranamay, and Jnanmay, involve the fields of activities of the living entities. Transcendental to these fields of living entities in the Supreme Lord, who is called Anandmay. The Vedanta Sutra also describes the Supreme by saying Anandmayo Bhyasat. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is by nature full of joy. To enjoy his transcendental bliss, he expands into Vijnanmay, Pranmay, Jnanmay, and Annamay. In the field of activities, the living entity is considered to be the enjoyer, and different from him is the Anandmay. That means that if the living entity decides to enjoy in dovetailing himself with the Anandmay, then he becomes perfect. This is the real picture of the Supreme Lord as a supreme knower of the field, the living entity as the subordinate knower, and the nature of the field of activities. Okay. This is the real picture of the Supreme Lord as the supreme knower of the field, the living entity as the subordinate knower, and the nature of the field of activities. Oh, so I kind of understand that Supreme Lord has created all of us to enjoy all the mice, uh, Annamay, all these things. One has to search for this truth in the Vedanta Sutra or Brahma Sutra. It is mentioned here that the codes of the Brahma Sutra are very nicely arranged according to cause and effect. Some of the sutras or the aphorisms are Na Vyad Ashrutahe 2.3.2, Natma Srutehe 2.3.18, and Paratu Tach Shrute is 2.3.40. The first aphorism indicates the field of activities, second indicates the living entity, and the third indicates the Supreme Lord. The summum bonum among all the manifestations of various entities. Wow, this is really powerful. So in the first six chapters, what we were thinking that our body, our soul, our subconscious. So it is in the reverse way that since God wanted to enjoy all these things, he expanded himself into various entities to enjoy all the minds, that is Anandmay, Pranmay, Jnanmay, Vijnanmay, and Anandmay. Through us, he enjoys. Oh, this is so powerful. Text 6 and 7. The five great elements, false ego, intelligence, the unmanifested, the ten senses, and the mind, the five sense objects, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate, the life symptoms, and convictions. All these are considered in summary to the field of activities and its interactions. Let's read the purport. From all the authoritative statements of the great sages, the Vedic hymns and the aphorisms of the Vedanta Sutra, the components of this world can be understood as follows. First, there are earth, water, fire, air, and ether. These are the five great elements, that is Mahabhuta. Then there are false ego, intelligence, and the unmanifested stage of the three modes of nature. Then there are five senses for acquiring knowledge: the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. Then five working senses, that is voice, legs, hands, anus, and genitals. Then above the senses, there is the mind, which is within and which can be called the sense within. Therefore, including the mind, there are 11 senses altogether. Wow. Then there are five objects of the senses. The senses are 11, and to experience them, we are given these objects, that is, smell, taste, form, touch, and sound. Yes. These are objects of senses. Yes. Now, the aggregate of these 24 elements is called the field of activity. Wow. If one makes an analytical study of these 24 subjects, then he can very well understand the field of activity. Then there are desire, hatred, happiness, and distress, which are interactions, representations of the five great elements in the gross body. The living symptoms, represented by consciousness and conviction, are the manifestation of the subtle body, mind, ego, and subtle body, which is mind, ego, and intelligence. Remember, we did mind, ego, and intelligence in, I think, chapter 4 or 5. These subtle elements are included within the field of activities. Yes. The five great elements are a gross representation of false ego, which in turn represents the primal stage of false ego, technically called the materialistic conception or tamas buddhi, intelligence in ignorance. This further represents the unmanifested stage of three modes of material nature. Yes, the unmanifested modes of material nature are called Pradhan. One who desires to know the 24 elements in detail, along with their interactions, should study the philosophy in more detail. In Bhagwat Gita, a summary only is given. The body is the representation of all these factors, and there are changes of the body which are six in number. The body is born, it grows, it stays, it produces byproducts, then it begins to decay, and at the last stage, it vanishes. Therefore, the field is a non permanent material thing. However, the Kshetrajna, the knower of the field, its proprietor, is different. Yes. Let's end here with Hare Krishna Maha Mantra because next is text 8 to 12 are given together. So it's going to be a long thing. Okay. Let's end with Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Let's do some Radha Ja. Radha, Shri Radha, Radha, Shri Radha, Radha, Shri Radha, Radha, Shri Radha.